I'm going to tell you about an amazing Hebrew word. The translation, or a direct translation, doesn't quite exist in English. This Hebrew word, which Israelis use all the time, again, it comes from the Yiddish, and it's a real poignant, characteristically Israeli saying. And if you hear an Israeli say this word, you might think it might be a little bit rude. But I promise you this, it's not rude, it's just very Israeli. The word is Tachlis. You know what the word Tachlis means? Get to the point. Cut the fat, cut the fluff. I don't care about what all of those little details are. What's the Tachlis? What's the point? What's the bottom line? How can we get rid of all the chit-chat? I just want to know what you mean. It's a really great word. But here's the even better word. And this word is also Hebrew. This word does not come from the Yiddish. The word is Tachlit. And the Tachlit is your overall purpose. Same idea to some degree. The Tachlis is get to the point. What's the substance? What's it really about? Your Tachlit is your overall purpose. Or you might call it, in some ways, your overall calling in life, your vocation. By the way, there is a great sociologist who many of you might have heard of, Max Weber. He talks about the idea of what a vocation actually is. And a vocation is a divine calling, or a calling from God. What did God call you to do on this planet, in this world? What is it that you were really meant to do? I mean, sociologists have explored this idea in many different ways. Some of you have studied Maslow in college, which is, I think, somewhat required reading, right? Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm seeing some nods. So Maslow says, picture a pyramid here, right? And you have your basic needs at the very bottom. What are your basic needs? Food, shelter, water. And then it goes a step above. What are your needs after that? You actually need some kind of belonging or some kind of relationship that exists in your life. You go a step above that and you get to things like your self-esteem, how you feel about yourself. And you realize that you're building a full human being here. And what is at the top of Maslow's hierarchy of need? He doesn't use the word vocation. He doesn't use the word calling. He uses the word self-actualization. That is, how do you actualize your full potential of who it is that you were meant to be? And then I'll tell you one of my favorite ways to understand divine calling. And it doesn't even involve God. It actually comes from Japanese culture. Ikigai. And Ikigai comes from two words. The words are ikiru and kai. And ikiru means life. I might be getting this a little bit wrong, right? Because you know I speak Hebrew but not Japanese. But ikiru means life, and kai means purpose. So it is really what your life's purpose is. But Ikigai is more profound than that. Ikigai says that there's an intersection of what you are good at, what the world needs from you, what you're passionate about, and what people will pay you for. And if you can find the intersection of all those things, you have really found your Ikigai. I actually think being a rabbi is very much my Ikigai. It's my calling, it's my vocation, however you want to put it. But I'll tell you that me getting to my calling took a very long time in my life. Or maybe I just always had the calling, but I never knew who was calling, or I never knew that it was actually the call for me. Why do people go to small liberal arts schools? I can tell you why I went to a small liberal arts school. Why do people go to small liberal arts schools? They don't know what their calling is yet. And so they want to go explore a plethora of different ideas of philosophy, of literature, of art, of history, science even, and then come together and figure out the direction that you actually want to go in. It broadens you. But you go there in order to find your way, because at 18, how could we possibly expect our children to know what their vocation or what their higher calling is? There are people who probably know what their calling is from early on in life, but I was not one of them. So I went to Clark University in Worcester, Massachusetts, because it was a small liberal arts school. I will tell you that at the time I was like, maybe I'll be a photographer. I was like, maybe I'll be a historian. Maybe I'll be an academic. I really did not know what I wanted to do. But people kept asking me one question. Do you want to be a rabbi just like your dad? And my answer growing up had always been, no, absolutely not. My dad's a rabbi, that's his thing, it's not my thing. People kept asking me over and over again, and I assume to some degree that is what it's like to be a rabbi's child. Everyone asks you, are you going to be a rabbi just like your parent? By the way, Amelia does not want to be a rabbi when she grows up, but she actually wants to be a cantor. I'll take it. But I did not want to be a rabbi, and I was quite sure of it. Something strange happened, though. I'm 18 years old, and people kept asking me the question, are you going to be a rabbi just like your father? And what I began to notice is that I have two brothers, and they weren't asking my brothers the same question. They were seeing something in me that I wasn't yet prepared to see in myself. And that is, this is my Ikigai, this is my vocation, this is my calling, this is who I'm meant to be. I was simply not answering the calling. Slowly, as the call came over and over again, I began to stop saying no, and I started saying, I don't know. And I don't know eroded a little bit into, I think so, which eventually transformed into, yes, I understand. This is my calling. Not easy to find your calling. I know plenty of people who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and still trying to figure out what their calling might be. Or they're still like, I never discovered it. I actually think you might be understanding that a little bit incorrectly. Because maybe it's right before you, but you haven't been willing to accept it. You haven't been willing to open your eyes and understand that some of the things that you might already be doing are in fact a part of your calling. Who calls us? I mean, sometimes it's God, right? But my divine calling actually came from other people, from those around me who recognized something within me. I bring up this idea of calling because I want to go back to our Parsha this week. The first word of our Parsha is Vayikra. And God called to Moshe, which is completely superfluous. Why? Because it says, Vaydaber elav b'ohel moed. God speaks to him at the tent of meeting. Why do you actually need to give us the context that God is calling to him if the next word is God is speaking to him? I think this is indicative of Moshe's calling. Maybe it's his calling again. By the way, Moshe, when he first is called by God, do you remember what he says when God says, you're going to be the one, your calling is to go free the Israelites, bring them out of Egypt, to go to talk to Pharaoh and do that whole Exodus thing? Remember what Moshe's response is? Mi anochi. Who am I that I should be able to do this? I mean, sometimes, even when we get a calling, we cannot believe, me? You want me to do that? Again, your Tachlit is your purpose, what it is that you were meant to do. And Moshe's calling is to bring the Israelites out of Egypt. You know, I think back to this line. I'm going to take us on a tiny tangent. I'll bring us back, I promise. You might have seen the movie Crazy Rich Asians. Okay, you've all seen it. Good. There's this line where the Chinese American is talking to her boyfriend's mother, who's very Chinese. And the girl says, don't you want your son to be happy? And the mother responds, You Americans think it's all about happiness. For us, it's about building something that's enduring. That's Chinese culture. Build familial legacy. That's the overall purpose. But for us, as Jews, it's about finding out what your meaning, what your purpose, what your Tachlit actually is. And some of the ways that we've discovered this have been precisely through hardship. Viktor Frankl survived Auschwitz, and the big key that he gave to surviving Auschwitz is by saying, he said, anyone who has a purpose in life, anyone who has a why, can endure any how, or can endure any what. That is, so long as you have your Tachlit, so long as you have your purpose, you can endure anything. That's why it's so important to have a calling, or to be able to try to unpack and figure out what it is that you were meant to do. And I'll tell you this as well, your calling at 20 or 30 might not be the same as your calling at 50 or 60 or 70. You might retire from one thing, from your vocation, and pick up something else that's your calling later in life. But you do very much indeed need that direction, that Tachlit. You need a purpose. Moshe found it. I found it. And you can find it as well. So I don't care what you call it. Maybe it's your Ikigai. Maybe it's your self-actualization. Maybe it's your vocation. Or maybe it is, in the language that I'm using very much, God calling to you and telling you, go forth, lech lecha, not just go forth, but be the very person that you were meant to be.